Good day, and welcome to this month's episode of Diversity Speaks True Talks with Terri. I'm Terri Howard, Associate Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Herzing University. At Herzing, we believe that diversity, equity, and inclusion are a living, breathing part of who we are and what we do. We've created this series in part because we wanted to create a forum for civil discourse. We won't always agree, but let's speak our truths in a way where we can listen, learn, and as a result, grow. Also, there's a lot of questions out there around topics related to DE and I. We hope to shed light on some of these topics and leave you with something to think about. True Talk is about taking the time to really understand everyone. So let's get talking and speak our truths. It is quite customary for people to get nostalgic around this time of the year. And I'm often reminded of my high school years where I had the opportunity to learn about the Jewish faith because I attended a high school where over 50% of our student population were Jewish. This expression may sound trite, but many of my friends are Jewish. And I often laugh thinking about sitting around a table or a fire and singing a verse or two of O Hanukkah. In addition to learning many of my friends' long held customs and beliefs, I also learned of their storied history. And in the spirit of celebrating National Remembrance Day, I can think of no other honor to my friends and their families but to share some of this with you. The United Nations Assembly designated January 27th, the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, as the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. On this annual day of commemoration, the UN urges every member state to honor the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust and millions of other victims of Nazism and to develop educational programs to help prevent future genocide. When they came to power in Germany, the Nazis did not immediately start to carry out mass murder. However, they quickly began using the government to target and exclude Jews from German society. Among other anti Semitic measures, the Nazi German regime enacted discriminatory laws and organized violence targeting Germany's Jews. The Nazi persecution of Jews became increasingly radical between 1933 and 1945. This radicalization culminated in a plan that Nazi leaders referred to as the final solution. The final solution was the organized and systematic mass murder of European Jews. This regime implemented this genocide between 1941 and 1945. The Nazis targeted Jews because the Nazis were radically anti Semitic. This means that they were prejudiced against and hated Jews. In fact, anti Semitism was a basic tenet of their ideology and at the foundation of their worldview. The Nazis falsely accused Jews of causing Germany's social, economic, political, and cultural problems. In particular, they blamed them of Germany's defeat in World War I. Some Germans were receptive to these Nazi claims. Anger over the loss of the war and the economic and political crises that followed contribute to the increasing anti Semitism. The instability of Germany, the fear of communism, and the economic shocks of the Great Depression also made many Germans more open to Nazi ideas, including anti Semitism. My guest today knows much more than I can begin to explain. Ed Davidson and his wife Esther were a part of history that we will never forget. Mr. Davidson is here today to tell a little of his story. Hello, Mr. Davidson, and thank you so much for being a guest on today's show.
Thanks for having me.
So, I understand that your father was an interpreter for the first Nuremberg trial. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, Dad was born in Europe in a country that was alternately under the control of first Russia and then Germany while he was going to public school. And as a result of that, he was obliged to become fluent orally and in writing in both languages. After World War II ended in August of 1945, he responded to an ad in the local Milwaukee newspaper, it's where he was living at the time, looking for people who were fluent in Russian and German. He responded to that ad, and 10 days after that, he found himself at the first of the 13 Nurenberg Trials that were held between 1945 and 1949. These trials were held to bring to justice military and civilian individuals accused of crimes directly related to the war. Dad was there for the first of those 13 trials. And this is the one where the major war criminals, both military and civilian, were charged. There were 23 of them. 11 of them were hanged. One committed suicide, and the rest either were acquitted or were sent to prison for terms ranging from 10 years to life.
That is fascinating, and I can only imagine the stories and certainly the emotional impact, not only for your dad but for the family as well.
Yes, Dad lost all of his family except for a sister and her family, which he managed to bring to the States. All of the remainder of his family were murdered by the Nazis. And I guess at this point it would probably be pertinent to tell you that one of the many crimes committed by the Nazis during the war was the systematic murder of literally millions of innocent people by conducting a wide variety of atrocities against them. Basically, if they didn't like you, they killed you. Now, 6 million of these people were Jews, but make no mistake about it, they most certainly were not the only ones involved. Catholic clergymen, i.e., Catholic leadership, Jehovah's Witnesses, persons of color, Freemasons, people of Slavic origin, communists, political dissidents, gypsies, homosexuals, and the physically and mentally disabled were all prime targets, as were in some cases some totally innocent civilians who simply happened to be in the way. Estimates of the total number of non-military dead during World War II in Europe range as high as 15 to 20 million people. And that's roughly equivalent to every man, woman, and child in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Indiana.
That is just incredible. I know that there's a lot of conversation around the concentration camps, but to my understanding, there are different types of camps, and I'm wondering if you could shed some light on the topic of concentration camps today, Mr. Davidson.
Be happy to. Uh, the first concentration camp was built in a village near Munich, Germany, in fact, 12 miles from downtown Munich. It was built in 1933. It's called Dachau, which is the name of the village. There were two different types of concentration camps that were created. labor camps and extermination camps. Labor camps housed people in appalling conditions who were usually worked to death as slaves. Many people died in the labor camps, mostly from starvation, but some were executed. Some died as a result of medical experiments carried out against them. The other type of camp was, for lack of a better term, was an extermination camp. And these were camps, and there were several, that were established and operated for the sole purpose of the wholesale slaughter of virtually all who were delivered there. There were 3 of note in Poland: Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor. Those 3 camps alone exterminated or murdered 3 million Jews, plus others from that list that I gave you a few minutes ago.
Thank you so much for that explanation on concentration camps. It surely cleared up a lot of misinformation that I had, and I hope it did for you as well. So, Mr. Davidson, I guess the final question that I would ask is, why is it important that we remember the impact of the Holocaust? And why is it important that we observe this time in history that must be painful for many?
Well, history is not there for us to like or dislike. History is there for us to learn from it. And if it offends us, even better, because we are then less likely to repeat it. History is not ours to erase. History belongs to all of us.
I couldn't have said it any better. Thank you so much, Mr. Davidson, again, for your time and for sharing just a little piece of your history.
Thank you again for having me.
In the aftermath of the Holocaust, the world has struggled to come to terms with the horrors of the genocide, to remember the victims, and to hold perpetrators responsible. These important efforts remain ongoing. Learn about the history and be disturbed. Learn about the history and talk about it. Learn about the history and vow not to repeat it. That's our truth, and that's our show for today. Be well, and see you next time.